Imagine waking up as royalty with the world at your feet, only to end the day broken, exiled and crippled in a land of silence called Lodebar, convinced that your very existence is a crime. This is not merely a history lesson, it is the heart-stopping saga of Mephibosheth, the forgotten prince who lost his father, his legs, and his crown in a single heartbeat, forcing him to hide in the shadows of shame for decades. Have you ever felt like you were dropped by those who were supposed to hold you, left to survive in a barren place where hope refuses to grow? Then this message is specifically for you. Welcome to Kingdom Stories, where we uncover the Bible's most profound mysteries. Please take a moment right now to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video to help us spread light in the darkness. Today, we journey from the golden halls of Gibeah to the dusty floor of Exile, witnessing a shocking act of mercy that proves no matter how shattered your life seems, the King is still calling your name. Prepare your heart, for we are about to discover why a man who saw himself as a dead dog was invited to feast as a son, and how that same scandalous grace is hunting for you right now. Imagine waking up as royalty with the world at your feet, only to end the day broken, exiled and crippled in a land of silence called Lodebar, convinced that your very existence is a crime. For this is not merely a history lesson, but the heart-stopping saga of Mephibosheth, the forgotten prince who lost his father, his legs, and his crown in a single heartbeat, forcing him to hide in the shadows of shame for decades. Have you ever felt like you were dropped by those who were supposed to hold you, left to survive in a barren place where hope refuses to grow? Then this message is specifically for you. So welcome to Kingdom Stories, where we uncover the Bible's most profound mysteries. And please take a moment right now to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video to help us spread light in the darkness, because today we journey from the golden halls of Gibeah to the dusty floor of Exile to witness a shocking act of mercy. His name was Mephibosheth, and his story begins long before the fall, starting with a name, a royal lineage, and an invisible war between thrones, promises, and blood pacts. So let us go back in time to an ordinary morning in the palace of Gibeah, where the sun streamed softly through high windows, piercing pure linen curtains, and the aroma of exotic spices mingled with the sounds of servants preparing the royal table, while guards marched with precision in the stone corridors, creating an appearance of stability. Yet behind the velvet curtains and golden walls, King Saul's kingdom already trembled in silence. While generals met in secret and messengers brought anxious war reports, a 5-year-old child ran through the central hall laughing, small, innocent, and unconcerned with the heavy political tension of adults, playing with scraps of cloth he imagined were swords and cloaks, treating the palace as his personal playground, where every column was a fortress and every staircase a castle of adventure, unaware that his name carried the crushing weight of generations as the grandson of Saul, the first king of Israel, and the son of Jonathan, the nation's most respected warrior. Jonathan was known for his courage, wisdom, and compassion, and even though he was heir to the throne, he did something unthinkable by giving up power for the love of truth and for the love of David, forming a pact of friendship stronger than any political ambition. For even though David was God's chosen one, Jonathan felt no envy, only honor. At that time, the kingdoms lived in constant tension, with Philistines threatening the borders and rebels appearing at every corner, leaving the people divided between the tradition of Saul and the promise made to David. But meanwhile, Mephibosheth continued to play, his small hands holding a wooden staff as if it were a spear, making noises with his mouth to simulate battles that existed only in his imagination, while his nursemaid followed him, smiling and calling out sweetly, "My prince, be careful." But he only laughed, running through the palace corridors as if he owned the world, not knowing that this would be the last day he would ever run. A few miles away, in a field covered in dust and blood, Saul's final battle unfolded, and the king, already weary, faced his final moments alongside Jonathan, who fought with honor until the end. But fate was written, and the royal line was about to be broken not by politics or strategy, but by the divine will to build a new throne for a shepherd named David. While history was being rewritten on the battlefield, Mephibosheth played and smiled, unaware that the time of innocence was about to end. For tomorrow still bore its semblance of normality, until a strong smell of oil and iron began to permeate the air, as if the palace itself sensed the coming storm. And outside, dust rose on the horizon while messengers hurried back and forth in a strange, uncomfortable silence that hung over Gibeah like the heavy air before a thunderstorm. Suddenly, the gates opened with a violent crash that echoed like thunder in the marble corridors, and a man staggered in with torn clothes and dust on his face, his tunic stained with blood that wasn't his alone, having crossed the battlefield to bring the news no one wanted to hear. His eyes wide and voice trembling as he looked straight at the guards and shouted the words that stopped time itself. "Saul is dead. Jonathan is dead." And those words seemed to pass through the walls and the floor into the next room, where Mephibosheth's nursemaid stood transfixed, dropping the cloth she used to wipe the boy's face as her eyes filled with tears, for she knew instantly what this meant. The royal line had been severed, the throne was empty, and according to the brutal customs of the time, when a new king arose, the old line was destroyed, not for safety, but out of fear, so that no one else could claim the throne. Her heart raced as she looked at Mephibosheth, who was still playing and laughing, completely oblivious to the tragedy that had just befallen his home, and she knew there was no time for explanations or goodbyes, only to flee. So she urgently scooped him up and ran through corridors, stairs, and gates, while chaos spread through the palace with screams and whispers. Other servants tried to escape or gather objects, but she had only one goal, which was to save that child, who was frightened in her arms, not understanding why she was running or why her breathing was so labored. But with each step, the desperation grew, along with the weight of the child in her arms and the terrifying fear that at any moment someone would appear to take the boy's life. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, she stumbled, and time seemed to slow down as her foot slipped on the smooth stones of the courtyard, causing her to lose balance as the weight in her arms pulled her forward, sending Mephibosheth falling hard against the cold stones with a dry, piercing sound of impact, followed by a sharp scream that rent the air. She tried to get up quickly and ran to him, but when she tried to lift him to his feet, he couldn't stand because his legs were motionless and useless, signaling that something had broken inside. And at only 5 years old, in that singular moment of panic, he lost the ability to walk forever. His expression changed as the immense physical pain merged with an even greater emotional pain, not just because of the fracture, but because everything collapsed at once. The throne, the family, the dreams, and the freedom, leaving the nurse to hug him tightly and apologize through tears that fell onto the boy's face as he wept silently without understanding that the prince had fallen, marking not just a physical fall, but the fall of an identity and the beginning of a life of silence and hiding where pain would become routine and shame a constant companion. The child who once ran through the palace corridors would now be carried, hidden, and forgotten. For that day, the sound of war silenced the laughter, and the fall sealed the fate of a boy born to be a prince, but who would grow up like a fugitive in a place called Lodebar, a name that said it all: without pasture, without words, without communication, and without hope. A forgotten village buried between dry hills and sun-cracked lands where nothing flourished, neither the earth nor dreams. A place where those who wanted to disappear and those with nowhere else to go hid in the shadows. It was a forgotten village buried between dry hills and sun-cracked lands, a place where nothing flourished, not the earth, not the crops, and certainly not dreams, for this was where those who wanted to disappear and those with nowhere else to go hid from the world. It was there, in this desolation, that Mephibosheth grew up, and as years passed, the boy who once ran free through the Golden Palace corridors now crawled through corridors of mud and shame. He lived hidden in the house of Mashir, a generous man who also carried his own traumas, in a simple house where the roof leaked on rainy days, the bread was hard, and water was sometimes scarce, but it wasn't the poverty that hurt the most. It was the haunting memory of who he used to be. Mephibosheth spent hours staring into empty space, and one night, sitting under the only dry tree in the yard, he asked himself the question that had plagued him for decades. Why? Why me? Why did my story have to be marked by tragedy, by loss, by a fall I didn't even cause? In Lodebar, there were no doctors to heal his legs, no promises to heal his heart, and no dreams for a future, so there he became a man who learned to survive without truly living. Sometimes, as he washed his face in the small, muddy stream that ran through the village, he would see his reflection and ask, "Does God still remember me?" But the water didn't answer, just as the sky seemed silent. If you have ever felt like you are living in a spiritual Lodebar, a place of dryness and silence where you feel forgotten by God, I invite you to subscribe to Kingdom Stories right now, like this video, and share it with others, because we are about to see how the silence is broken by a king's voice. It was in Lodebar that Mephibosheth learned to live in constant fear. Fear of being discovered, fear of being remembered by his enemies, and the crushing fear of hoping for something only to be disappointed again. Thus, Mephibosheth became a man crippled in his feet and wounded in his soul, bearing the name of a prince but carrying the heart of a fugitive, possessing a history of royalty but enduring a reality of exile, thinking, maybe this is the end for me, for perhaps the fate of those who fall is only to disappear. But little did he know that heaven had written another chapter, and that even in Lodebar, grace would still find a way. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, the city of the great king, power was now consolidated under David's command. The battles had been won, the throne was firm, the enemies were silent, and the nation was at peace. But not all wars are fought with swords, for some of the hardest battles take place in the silence of the human heart. King David had it all: wealth, influence, and respect. But one night, while the musicians played and the advisors discussed laws, the king left the room and walked through the palace corridors with slow steps, as if searching for something he couldn't name, stopping before a balcony to look at the horizon where the moon cast its silvery glow over the rooftops of Jerusalem. But the king's eyes were fixed not on the landscape, but on the past, as his heart suddenly filled with memories of a friend, a soul brother, someone who was by his side when no one else was. Jonathan. The memory of that face was clear. The sound of his voice, the strong embrace, and the oath made in the middle of the field beneath a starry sky echoed in his mind. "Promise me, David, that you will be kind to my descendants, even after I am no longer here." And David had promised with tears in his eyes, with a heavy heart, and with his soul in a covenant. But the years had passed, wars came, life happened, and that promise remained hidden like a forgotten document in the back of a drawer until that night, when something awakened him inside as if God had whispered to his memory, "Do you remember what you promised?" The next morning, the king summoned his closest servants, and though the hall was filled with leaders, scribes, and men of war, the question he asked surprised everyone. "Is there still anyone in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Silence fell over the room as some looked at each other and others lowered their heads until a name emerged from the mouth of a servant named Gibeah, who had served Saul for years and now served David. Gibeah hesitated, knowing the complexity of the past, but he answered, "There is still one, a son of Jonathan, lame in his feet, living in Lodebar." David asked no more questions. He didn't want to know if the man was strong, worthy, or useful to the kingdom. He simply ordered, "Bring him before me." And in that moment, the forgotten promise was rekindled, destiny was redirected, and a journey began because the king's heart still beat for someone everyone else had forgotten. The sun was already high over the hills of Lodebar when red dust rose in the distance, heralding the arrival of something unusual. Horses, guards, and royal banners crossing the desert toward a place no one expected kings to remember. It was rare to see movement on those forgotten paths, as visitors didn't arrive here and invitations weren't extended. But that morning, the king had sent his word, and while the residents watched with suspicion and fear, the soldiers stopped before Mashiach's house and knocked loudly on the door. Knock, 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 causing the world to seem to freeze for an instant. Inside the house, Mephibosheth felt a shiver run down his spine as the sound of the knocking made an old, familiar fear return with a vengeance, causing him to look at his nanny, now older, who watched him with distressed eyes while he looked at the dirt floor and silently thought, "Now they've come to kill me. After all these years, they've finally found me."
Release me from this suffering.
For a moment, he considered fleeing. But where could he go with his crippled feet and his wounded history? The door opened slowly, and the soldiers didn't draw their swords or call him a rebel. Instead, one of them, with a solemn expression, simply said, "Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, King David wishes to see you." The words were like a flash in his mind. His name, his ancestors, and David, the new king, his grandfather's former rival, making his heart race with questions. Why now? Is it revenge disguised as kindness? Is it mercy or a trap? Mephibosheth lowered his eyes as childhood memories came like violent waves. The palace corridors, his father's face, the fall, the exile, and the silence. And without saying a word, he was placed on a horse surrounded by soldiers and taken back to the place he had once called home. But he was no longer the same boy who ran between golden columns. He was a broken man, his head down, full of questions and unprepared for what was to come, unaware that as the horses advanced toward Jerusalem, he was being taken not to judgment, but to a reunion with grace. The journey was long, and Mephibosheth kept his eyes fixed on the ground for most of it, not wanting to see the soldiers' looks or feel the weight of doubt on every face watching him. But as they approached the walls of Jerusalem, his breathing grew heavier and his heart pounded, for with every meter that took him back to the palace, he felt as if he were walking toward a courtroom where his sentence had already been decided. Finally, they arrived, and though gates opened and trumpets sounded, Mephibosheth heard only the drowning voices of his past screaming that he was a disgrace to the royal line. Led into the great hall, the richness of the tapestries and the light from the stained glass windows felt unreachable, and when he saw King David, his legs gave way, causing him to fall face down and whisper in shame, "Who is your servant that you should look upon a dead dog like me?" But in the silence that followed, David did not strike him down. Instead, he approached with unusual lightness, seeing not a cripple, but the son of his friend, and a promise to be kept, saying firmly, "Mephibosheth, do not fear, for I will restore to you the lands of your grandfather, and you will eat at my table always." These words were thunderclaps of mercy that broke decades of silence, proving that grace does not wait for perfection, it only waits for presence. As Mephibosheth took his seat among the princes, something powerful happened. The royal table covered his crippled feet, hiding his limitations so that he was no longer defined by his fall, but by his position as a son. This story is a mirror for us all. For how many of us have stumbled in life, marked by pains we didn't choose, living in emotional Lodebars where we feel unworthy and forgotten. Yet today, the King is calling again, asking, "Is there anyone I can show kindness to?" And the answer is you who carry trauma and shame. The King's table is set with a place bearing your name, where your past is covered by love. So if you hear his voice today, do not run away, but simply say, "Here I am," and let grace lift you up. If this story of redemption touched your heart, please subscribe to Kingdom Stories for more messages that reveal the light behind the shadows, and share this video with someone who needs to know they are not forgotten.